This podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today.
Hello and welcome to Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations, the show that aims to elevate the conversation about cannabis to a higher level. I'm your host Paul, and today we welcome Thai cannabis business owner and activist Kitty Chopaka. Growing up in Australia before returning to Bangkok for tertiary study, Kitty would go on to spend over a decade managing a law firm before burnout led to soul searching, which eventually led her to cannabis. Kitty is the owner of Bangkok-based cannabis store Chopaka, which sells cannabis flower and terpene gummies. She continues to advocate for cannabis in terms of business, policy, human rights and social justice, as well as responsible and safe use. She sees that cannabis has enormous economic value and various beneficial uses, and wants to call upon governments to adopt more progressive views about the plant and its potential powers. If you like what you hear on today's show, make sure you subscribe or follow on your podcast platform of choice. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, a 5-star review really helps the show. But for now, please enjoy my conversation with Kitty Chopaka. You have been described as the mother of Thai cannabis. You are a tireless cannabis advocate. So tell me, what is a day in the life of Kitty Chopaka?
It usually starts early in the morning with either a podcast, phone conversation with, shall I say, growers around the countries, especially the outdoor ones. So they tend to wake up really early. So by 6 a.m., I'm already awake. And it just kind of goes up from there, I would say, with the wake and bake session over a conversation is quite a good start. And then that kind of plans into what am I doing for the whole day. I will be traveling today, actually, after this session. Someone's picking me up and we're heading off to Chonburi to speak with a bunch of people, trying to collect some more signatures. There's going to be a lot of smoking, food, more speaking and listening. It just kind of evolves around the speaking, the listening, getting people to trying to understand something or trying to understand something on their end. And I never thought that, I don't know how that can be described as work somehow now, because I enjoy every moment of it. I get to samples the really interesting stuff from all throughout. I get to enter farms and places where people don't tend to enter. And I get to meet really incredible sets of people from all walks of life. And I get to go to like crazy places. And that's just kind of in general what my day tend to be. It's all over the place. I have no idea how I get a lot of work done. I don't know that either. But then again, I sleep at midnight and my day either evolves around work or the children. And they actually take a lot less time now because they are getting old.
Yeah, you've moved on from the real babies to the flower babies now.
Oh, God. Yeah. But mine's about to go into the teens. So I'm not really looking forward to that. But I think I'll be like one of those cool moms.
Oh, the coolest mother of the Thai cannabis industry. But, you know, you're a fascinating person. You do incredibly fascinating work. It's going to be so much fun to talk to you today. It's almost a shame that this is an audio-only podcast because the smile on your face radiates just how much passion and joy can be in this industry. But though we are going to talk about Thailand predominantly today, something that is relevant to my audience is that you spent a significant amount of your youth in Australia. So how did your time growing up here impact your understanding or experience of drugs?
Remember, was it Harold or Harrod, the giraffe?
Yes, yeah, the drug bust giraffe, yep.
It wasn't so much. It was a stark contrast between I went and watched a movie that I shouldn't be when I was about 13, and it was a very popular movie in Thailand back then. It's called Siadai, which means regret. And it shows like pretty much the reefer madness. Like it starts with weed and then ends with prostitution and heroin injection. Like
classic direction.
13-year-old trauma. And that was how I view drugs. Just like every other 13-year-old kid back in the old back in the early 90s.
Nah, that's not old at all. You're going to live forever through cannabis, so age is nothing.
Oh, hell yeah. Like, this does not work. Like, this is not me doing. This is Mary Jane. But yeah, it was a very stark contrast because the puppet giraffe was talking about the human body as a whole. Like, what would happen if you consume something? Where does it go? And they're not really talking about drug as drug per se, but the things that you consume and it will have certain reaction with your body. So that was quite a totally different thing to what I had back then. And then the other stark contrast was I still go and visit Thailand every year. It's like the mom and dad because they're divorced. So during the Christmas breaks, I'll be in Thailand, like the worst of the heat of Australia. I'm like, see ya.
Yeah, good call, good call.
Oh God, I did that twice. Not gonna, no. So I come back to Thailand and it was during the Thaksin era. I saw the plane that blew up. That day I landed, the event happened in the morning. I landed in the evening. And that was kind of the middle of the war on drugs in Thailand at that time. I had cousins, aunties, uncles in jail, in and out of jail still because of that. I have like mom's friends, their kid died, got shot because of things happen. It's kind of almost like the Duterte in Thailand at that time. That's probably where he got the idea from in the first place. So there's those stark contrasts of it's the same bloody thing that they're talking about, but there's two different sides of the coins. So I actually tried weed first time in Australia.
I can't imagine it was that good. We, particularly back then, we didn't have great stuff. I mean, still, there's some pretty terrible stuff out on our, quote unquote, black market. How was that?
I think I was lucky. My boyfriend in high school at the time, his dad was growing for particular sets group of people. So there were good stuff, hydro back in the day. And I was like, what? Like, I really did not understand, like, you can do that with, like, weed. Like, normally it's, in Thailand, it comes in a brick. And, it does not look like what it looks like. And I remember the first time, I still remember the thing that I said. I was sitting on a bloody beanbag and I was going like, feels like I'm walking on the moon. I'm sitting on a beanbag, by the way.
Hearing you describe it as a bloody beanbag is very Australian.
Yeah. And then we played Metal Slug, my boyfriend and I back then played Metal Slug 4 on the PS2 from the beginning to the credits. And I had no bloody clue what was going on that whole time. Like, because I keep on dying and it keeps on coming back. I thought I was the other player, but that was 18. I'm a very strict rule-following goody two-shoe person. I actually never skipped a day in, at school. I was like A students. I love doing chemistry and math and all of those weird shit. But I waited until I was 18 before I started drinking, before I tried weed for the first time. And weed just never one of those things that I thought it was actually a drug, because it's a herb, it's a plant, like, natural. Doesn't make sense. It's like in coffee, it does things to your head too.
It's funny because you've mentioned waking and baking, you've mentioned kind of getting things done. I think a lot of people have the idea that stoners can't get things done, that that we're lazy and we don't have motivation, but you clearly have a lot. And you actually spent years in the corporate world before ending up in cannabis. So how did you go from managing a legal firm to being such a prominent figure in Thai cannabis advocacy?
Well, here's the weird thing. I never thought that I would be in this position at all. I didn't have really a life per se. Like, work was work. I was running the law firm because that was my father's dream. That wasn't really my dream. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to do bioengineering. Like, I wanted to work with viruses. It would have worked out.
Yeah, that would have been, a lucrative industry for sure.
Like, one way or the other, I think somehow I'll end up like on some sort of a podcast. But I couldn't do that because my score, what did they call it back in Queensland at that time? Like, they keep on changing abbreviation, whatever it is, wasn't that great. because I wasn't that great at physics as I thought that I should be. But work was difficult. I hated law because I hated the people. I didn't hate the law. I loved the law. I love reading it. I love understanding how law becomes policy, how it exists, why it exists, and how it changes. But the people surrounding it annoys the crap out of me. Yeah, and it stressed me. And I used cannabis back then was after work, and I was religiously one of those people who goes 7 p.m. and you don't call me. It wasn't anything. It was me just like I need to zoned out. Otherwise, I won't be able to go back into work the next morning. But I gave all of that up. I didn't want to do it anymore. I told my father, like, this is not my dream. I don't know what I wanted to do. So I went into marketing from law, totally shift. And back then was like, startups, UX, UI was a thing. I was interested in like how that worked out. And mom just kind of go, weed, ganjapreneur. It's
on, Mom.
Realizing Canada, blah, 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 and this and that. And she was sending me articles. My stepdad, unfortunately, he passed. He was the smoker in the house. So I think through her, because they would discuss things all the time. And that just kind of went into, okay, fine, I got really nothing to do. Let me explore. And that was the Pandora's box. I have this habit of getting really obsessed, and cannabis has always been on the back burner, waiting for that obsession to kind of really take hold. Because ever since I was, the first time I tried it, I try to know as much as I can about it. Like, how do you grow it? Why do you grow it? What does it do? Why is it like that? Why do you do that? That's always just kind of been the interest. And just because I got pregnant and had 2 kids doesn't mean that cannabis obsession can stop, because there's this thing called hemp seeds. Are you aware that like the omega-6 369 is like in the perfect ratio? So all throughout my life, this has always been a little tiny obsession that I never thought that would actually becomes anything, because I have a bunch of those.
Well, I believe that you actually had intentions of being a farmer and you spent some time in Oregon in the US. I think that actually kind of changed your mind about things, didn't it? What was your experience there?
I did not grow in the US. I only visited. A lot of people misunderstood that I grew cannabis. I still don't. I kind of, if I actually do, I put in a pot and just kind of see how long it will live more than anything else, because I always traveling. So that just doesn't seem to make sense for me. But I wouldn't say studied. I talked to a bunch of people. This is just how my way of working. The law firm gave me the bravery of just randomly go and ask. Because if you don't ask, how would you know? They won't tell you. That's fine. Go and ask another person. There will always be someone who's wanting to talk to you. And I just did that. I managed to find a friend of a friend who owns a farm, and I asked all of the questions so that I can put it into a business plan. And then I realized that it wasn't feasible.
Yeah, they've had like basically a glut of cannabis grown in the US that they couldn't sell or use or make profit from. So this big idea of people developing farms and feeding families and feeding communities and having a stable income just didn't quite work out, did it?
No, it didn't for them. But also the thing that happens everywhere when cannabis becomes legalized. So by studying it, by knowing at a very early stage, because this was like back in 2016, 2017. So Oregon became legalized for recreational in 2018. Like, it was so lucky that I did not be able to, get the funding or all of those things to have it done, because I would have been not in a good place. But that happens everywhere when legalization occurs. And when it happened in Thailand, it took on the same form. So being aware of that, it's not like I was able to shield my business, from the storm and the people that we support from the storm, at least it gives us some windbreakers. Like we're losing people and we will lose, the army, at least half of it through the storm. But at least I have some idea of how to get us out of there or how to protect as many people as we can.
Well, we're going to dig into that a little bit more. So what an excellent segue to start talking about Thailand. Now, when people think progressive drug policy, they don't usually think Asia. And last year, the Thai government shocked a lot of people when they down-scheduled cannabis, removing it from the Category 5 narcotics list. How did this come to be? This kind of shocked the world.
Here's the funny things. This is Thailand. That's a hashtag. Hashtag TIP. This is Thailand. And that is the best explanation for anything that you can't explain in this country. So it was smoke and mirrors. Somehow it happened by not having the word cannabis mentioned in the new narcotics code. The new narcotics code is a collection of 16 different narcotics act and psychotropic act, or like substance control act, all roll into one. And with that in itself is, what shall I say, the ultimate law of all of our substances. How the police are supposed to act, how you are supposed to act, you can't use it, how you access it, everything to the fine print. There's no mentioning of cannabis and magic mushroom in those, because in itself, what they did was with the scheduling 1 to 5, we have 5 lists of narcotic schedule, with 1 being heroin, LSD, the stuff that doesn't have any medical uses, all the way down to 5, which is we have our special one is all the plant related drugs that's in there. Like Kratom used to be in there, that has been legalized. Cannabis, magic mushroom, opium, those will kind of be in that space. They didn't mention it because it's a list that is ever changing. And the health minister can say whatever's on that list in another announcement. So that's how the law is supposed to be. But back before, they would usually mention it in the act of Schedule 5, such as cannabis, magic mushroom, opium, and the list goes on. They removed that such as with cannabis and magic mushroom. The opium is still in there, by the way. They go, oh yeah, the code no longer view cannabis as a narcotic. Kratom has been removed, so yeah, it's no longer narcotics. And somehow they just kind of went, oh yeah, okay. And they got all the board on board. Like we got ONCB, which is the Office of Narcotics Control Drug. We got the Ministry of Public Health on board. Like everyone was somehow on board back then. Politics, by the way. And then it went legal, but without any acts, any cannabis act to control it. So right now, it's not like we don't have rules. Cannabis has been renamed as a control herb. And with that space is where I play, which is you still need a license. You still need to report monthly of all cannabis coming in and all cannabis going out, meaning passports, numbers, ID card, blah, 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 blah. Also, without the license in itself, you're actually not allowed to sell it. Even with the license, you're not allowed to sell joints because that's ready to use recreational product. That is still illegal. Any recreational, if you're selling for the purpose of recreational, it's still illegal. But if you're selling for the sake of selling, that's a totally different thing. That's where I am. I don't sell it for recreational. You don't see any joints there. We don't have edibles. I think the only edibles that I make are like vegan CBD chocolate tarts with CBD flowers that has been, cooked in coconut milk. Coconut milk is, we have a lot of those ingredients here. But that's kind of where a lot of misunderstanding takes place. People think that recreational cannabis and recreational consumption is legal in Thailand. No, cannabis has been descheduled. If you do that inside of your own home, do whatever you want. Like, you can put it wherever you want. You can do whatever you want. Just don't burn down the house. And don't be silly and smoke inside. That's stupid. And that's pretty much the space that you are allowed. Everything else is actually very well controlled. But because TIT, we're actually in here having a little bit more of a mess that needs to clean up by making sure that people understand. Like, say, the cooking classes that you went to, the way that it's done is quite silly in my terms. Like, actually, I can say that does not show how cannabis and Thai cuisine actually works. We do not use the oils as a topping. That doesn't exist. And cannabis oil in itself only exists within this past, however, within the Rick Simpson stage. So it's not something that should be promoted. Like, when I try to do cooking, it's going back into how Thais would traditionally do cooking. Like, I would use the coconut milk as a base instead of butter or cream or milk. And with the high saturated fat, you're getting the same stuff and you're making the base of any vegan dishes. Or it goes into the curries that we eat, that we cook. It goes in, it's like a recipe that, or the traditional methods of how desserts and things are made. So, yeah.
That was something I certainly shared with people that asked me after I did that cannabis cooking class, is that it essentially was a novelty. It wasn't immersing myself in a rich Thai culture. It was basically a bit of an opportunity to throw some cannabis oil into what was an exceptional cooking class. Like, I had an incredible time cooking that food. It was a multi-hour experience. I got to spend time with a wonderful chef. But you're exactly right. There's kind of just this right, let's just throw something out there because people will want to come. But there does need to be a responsibility on, educating people about cannabis, its history, its uses, and being a little bit more respectful of that.
Yeah, like, at the end of the day, the story is what sells. So it will help them sell better if they pay attention to that. Also, it's biting people in the butt now because you don't have any local customers. When the tourist goes away because of recession, because of war, because of all of those things.
I certainly noticed as well that every store that I shopped, particularly in Koh Samui, was not geared towards locals. Even, prices themselves were certainly tourist trap prices, knowing that, cashed up Westerners are going to come through and be willing to spend $40 on a gram.
Yeah, as much as people believe that my shop has the most expensive weed, just because when it first opened, that was the price that I got. But it's okay. I keep the reviews up there, so that it's not like 5. Because as soon as you see 5 on the review, I feel that it's fake.
They're just offering everyone a free joint to give them a 5-star review when it's all 5-star reviews.
We don't do promotions at all because that's kind of illegal. Because I look at it as how the rules that I'm trying to push out, and I follow that. So I follow beyond what actually requires. And also I behave like our company behaves like a big player company, even though we only have 420,000 baht capital registered.
There's this idea that the cannabis community, quote unquote, is an all-loving, all-encompassing, beautiful experience where everyone's nice to each other and caring. But, I've read the reviews from your shop and you can see those jerks just coming through, people that will never be happy with anything. And that's one of my biggest frustrations with cannabis, is this idea that we're all in it together. But truly, there's a bunch of people in there that are just incredibly selfish. So I really admire what you're doing to try and set a standard, because I think people are seeing places with no standards, and then they're coming to you and seeing you have standards and having protocols and policies and checking IDs. And that upsets people because they don't want that minor inconvenience. But I'm just grateful that it even exists. And I truly believe, your shop was my favorite that I went to because it was the most legitimate.
Thank you. But the drama is what makes the cannabis industry go round.
Yeah.
Don't forget that it came from somewhere that is underground, meaning that the communication and all of those things is not their finest forte. It's a dog eat dog world. And when it comes from the underground, it's managed by the people of the underground, which is a totally different sets of rules. Cannabis in itself, especially in the advocacy space, I can tell you right now, it was adorable until it becomes legal. Enjoy it now. And when it becomes legal, that's when money talks. And there's a saying in Thai, it's like "Ngan ma pa luk," which means like when the money comes, the towel drops to the floor.
That's a really interesting point. And I see that as Australia, emerges through 7 years of medical legalization, and we are tiptoeing very slowly towards recreational legalization. There's a lot at play. There's a lot of money at stake here. There's a lot of businesses, big businesses that want to, dominate the industry. And having worked for 2 years as a bud tender in Canada, it was a lot of the big guys were succeeding while the little guys suffered. And I'm sure that's happening in Thailand as well, and is only going to continue to happen. But I guess I'm curious about the conservative attitude towards drugs in Thailand. You shared an anecdote once before, your dad being a lawyer. He basically said, if you get into trouble, I can help you out with anything, but if it's related to drugs, I can't help you. So it almost sounds like decriminalisation was a bit of an accident in Thailand. How have we gone from social conservative values about drugs, extreme penalties, to this free-for-all?
How shall I say? The thing, give me a second. Moji, my little kitty, is wants attention, but now she's kind of okay.
I've had to lock my own cat out, so yes, I completely understand.
So here's the funny thing. My dad said he wouldn't help with drugs, because, but his last name, the last name that I have, Chopaka, means, flower bud or bouquet of flowers, which is very fitting. That's why I use it to name it. And now his last name is tied forever with cannabis in Thailand. I didn't actually ask him for permission for that.
Well, it's your name too.
Yeah, so I was like, yeah, it's mine. But he was eventually converted. It took about a couple of years. And one of the first things that I did, which I never thought that I would, was I rolled a joint in front of him while he was over, when we were having, conversation. Well, I think he was having coffee or tea. And I was like, yeah, I'm about to roll and I'm going to go for a smoke. It was still illegal back then. And Dad was shocked and awed all at once because he never really seen anyone roll a joint. And then he asked me, do you have to keep it here? Meaning in the house where I live, where my kids, my husband lives. And I'm like, but if I don't keep it here, how am I going to use it? And he just kind of, and then there were scenes of him coming back and asking random questions, and then coming back, and I go, I've been playing around with making oils. I'm trying to find the best recipes, what would work best for this or that. And he's like, can I have some? I'm like, okay, I'll take a little bottle. And then he comes back and goes, can I have some more? And I'm like, what's going on? Why shouldn't last a lot longer than? It's like, it works really well, and I've been sharing with my friends. Okay, so I gave him a really big bottle where he can have fun with it. And then he comes back again and goes, my wife, his current wife, is you stealing his oils for PMS. And I'm like, okay, I'll make sure I'll get a bigger bottle. And then one day he came over with a little esky and he gave it to me. And I was like, what's this? Because during those visits, eventually he asked for some seeds. I opened up and it was flowers. Really bad sativa grown outdoor, no clue what's going on. But it came back as flowers. And that was it took about 2 years. And that was before the legalization happened, about a year before, when he brought it back. It actually shows that 60-plus-year-old people didn't actually think that cannabis is such a bad thing. They remember their mothers, their fathers back in the days. My mother told me that my great-grandmother was selling weed to the people back from the field. So she saw that. And it was another thing. And they used to cook with it, like put it into chicken soup, because the fat in the chicken is able to kind of take out some of the happy compounds in the plant itself. But normally it's used because of it's a male plant. When they find a male plant, they would take the whole bloody thing, wash it, and then chuck it into the pot. And about 2 or 3 unlucky chickens will kind of be like, you ain't gonna stay with us anymore. So that's how it's normally done.
It's interesting to me how that generation above us has been kind of, I think they even tricked themselves into not being pro-cannabis. You know, my mum had the story where she's like, oh, I tried it once in the 70s and it did nothing. Well, then every Christmas for the last 8 years, like she ignores cannabis for every other day of the year. Then on Christmas, I'll roll up a joint and she's like, oh yeah, pass that over my way. She's like, oh, I'm having the best time ever. And then from Boxing Day onwards till Christmas the next year, it's like it never happened. And I've appreciated that. You know, I'll take the one day out of the year over no days. But over time, you know, I've tiptoed, I've chipped away. She didn't want me consuming. She had no interest in it herself. She's finally on medical cannabis. She's in her mid-70s. She's swimming for the first time in 20 years. She's sleeping better than she ever has. And it's really tricky to convince this generation that it might help them, but I keep seeing people that it does help. So it's so exciting that we can change people's minds and that you were able to change your dad's mind like that.
It's like they love the torture. Like, I don't understand. It's like, why are you constantly... Yeah. And I'm like, do something about it. Come on. Just here, have a joint.
They just love complaining, don't they? Yeah. It's like, oh, hey, I've got something that might work. Yeah. Oh, no, but then I can't complain about it.
No, you can then go, yeah, you can complain about why weed is still illegal.
Yes.
For me, an old person who's not going to do anything anymore. And then here's the other thing. The younger generation, they don't actually care. And they are able to have access to Google and stuff, so they don't really have the reefer madness mindset. And it's the middle-aged people that is having the most problem, and it's the middle income people that is having the most problem, because it seems like it goes against the mindset of work hard, get what you know, career. You're not supposed to have anything. The only thing that you're allowed to do is not even smoking, but alcohol. Drinking loads and loads of alcohol, ruining your liver. My stepdad actually died because of a fatty liver.
So that actually leads me to a really good point that you've spoken about before, where if people are going to consume a mind-altering substance anyway, you know, and I don't think we have this conversation enough, because that is what alcohol is. You know, we don't accept that often in Australia. We're just like, oh, it's just the thing you do every day after work and every weekend. It's just what you do. Well, there's folks like you and I that see that cannabis works a little bit better than alcohol does. So you've spoken about this before. If you're going to take a mind-altering substance, why not cannabis? And you've even spoken about this from the perspective of a parent. You want your kids to be educated. You want them to understand. Why is that so important to you?
Because you can't tell them no. Just say no doesn't bloody work. The more you say no, the more you go, don't do that. Like, the more you're like, go on, try. It works the totally opposite way. And I remember me being a teenager. I remember me being stupid young adult. And it's not the telling no, it's the constant bits of information that I get. Because I remember that giraffe. I remember there was a book that they forced us to read about like this girl who took E and then had too much water, like sad story. Yep. Like, you know, but as bad as that book is in terms of traumatizing, it actually tells you what you're not to do. So when I was taking E, I go, pace yourself on the water. Education is the thing that can protect us from anything, like whether it's sex education, whether it's drug education. or just in general, how to pay your taxes so you're not getting those guys coming after you. I think that's more scarier than, weed.
Kitty, you've got a lot of fight in you, and I absolutely love that. And in November 2022, you spearheaded a campaign to fight the growing legal opposition to Thailand's approach to decriminalisation. With the new government coming into power this year, there's been a lot of talk about cannabis decriminalisation not working. Where do things currently stand? Is there a real threat that Thailand may take a step backwards with the way they've approached cannabis?
Anything could happen because of TIT. So I always plan for the worst, for the best scenario, and for nothing to happen. More likely that nothing to happen is what will happen. This government seems to be a lot of bark and no bite. Also, the other guy had better PR, because even though he went on Bloomberg and says that he's going to make cannabis illegal again, there was only 2 other news sources that contact me for interviews. Usually with Anutin, the guy before, there'll be like 10 of them going like, oh, is he really going to do that? Is he really going to do that? This one is like I don't think they even believe him when he said it. Well, it doesn't mean that it won't be able to go the other way. Because right now I see that there's a fair few things that's happening that I can't seem to control, and I don't know how to deal with it because it's becoming an international problem. And that in itself is probably a bigger problem than what we can do internally. Because if it's a domestic problem, that's okay. There's other ways how Thais manage things, like massage parlors. It's illegal to sell sex. It's actually illegal as to what they are doing behind the door there. But technically it is legal because they do follow a set of rules. So that's where we'll probably end up being in terms of cannabis, until the international scene is able to come out fully supporting the legalization. And that's probably a harder one than anything else. Because apart from, it's not the conservative that's having the problem or the middle income sets of people, it's the politician that has problems with cannabis all throughout the world. And I swear, I just don't like them.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So I guess what you're saying is, we're needing the EU to step up, the UN to step up, all these massive global organizations that can really make a difference, because there's all just these little spot fires across the world. There's Malta and Canada and the different states in the US and Thailand.
Well, the US need to step back down and let other people, work it out, because they are not legal the whole country, and they are ruining a lot of markets all throughout the world. I go to the Czech Republic and I see US weed, so shitty. Yeah. So that's kind of sad. I thought they were better than this, but then everything that seems to come out of there, it's like factory farm. So that's what would happen if you go too commercial. So I use the US as a don't do that. I use Canada as a, oh my God, those guys are all for the big companies and only for the big companies, and they are all over in Australia. That's where the money, they're going over there to you guys. They're trying to Thailand, and then they got screwed over because Thai people are TIT.
They stood up for themselves, because half of my medical cannabis is from Canada. Sometimes all of it is, and it's stuff that I've had on the recreational market that's dirt cheap and average quality. Like, it's still good, but then they can mark up the price, put it in a different tub, send it to Australia, call it medical. So there's definitely examples across the world of how not to do things. Are you seeing anywhere in the world that is, on track to getting it right? No one's got it right yet, but is anyone heading the right way?
I would say that I do not know enough nuances in each of those places. Like, even with mine, like with my space, I'm still learning things every day. And there's a lot more things that we don't understand, undercurrents, like all of those little things. And it's usually the little things that tend to end up being problematic when it comes up. And those things are not usually picked up by foreigners or those that don't operate or live in that location. So to tell you the truth, I'm full support for everywhere to legalize themselves and also support themselves and figure a way to actually make it work. Like, protecting what they have. And at the end of the day, we'll be able to kind of work it out together. Because if they don't make it good on their end, other people that's surrounding them will suffer, just as what's going on right now in Thailand with certain loose laws, with the misunderstanding of that there's no law existing. That opens up space for people to run amok, behave badly. And also with the lack of regulation, it goes elsewhere. That's the same as the US. When there's lacks of regulation going out, or like the regulation doesn't work, the people can't make money off it, the people can't pay for their kids to go to school or put food on the table, they will work any way to make sure that they are able to do that. And it will end up hurting other places like where we are. And we don't want to continue with the herd and passing the buck around. It just doesn't make sense. And the only way we can do that is we all need to be strong where we are and support those domestically and then work together internationally, not to kind of steal each other's glory, but to how we can support. Because I know that I won't be able to grow good Colombian gold in Thailand. And I would definitely want them from all the way from Colombia. Just like good wine. I'm not going to get like champagne, like from California. Like, it has to come from Champagne. So that will eventually be what I want to see. I want to be like the collective of all the good stuff because I enjoy it. But I can't do that without supporting and making sure that everyone else within this space have the best stable structure as possible.
Something I'm really fascinated about is I saw an Instagram post, and forgive me if my Google translation didn't work out too well, but I believe there is a proposal for a legal framework. It's a 37-page Cannabis Act that would regulate permission to grow, offences for importing, mandatory Thai shareholders, rules for where cannabis can be sold. So there's the document. Not a video podcast, but for the listeners, the document, that big, thick document is in your hands. So tell us about that.
Well, this is my second time around drafting this bloody law. And also I've supported about 4 or 5 different groups way before medical cannabis was legal. Because people thought that it's something that kind of came out of nowhere. It's a long process of people that's been working on this for over 10 years before the legalization actually happened. I was contributing to that for about 5 or 6 years. And it was quite interesting because back then we were seen as drug dealers, drug users, just druggies in general.
It's risky putting yourself out there like that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not a place for a woman to be. In Thailand, like we're still very sexist country. And that's kind of why my role ended up a little bit different than the other ladies that's in the space, is that they view me as a big sister and then eventually a mother. I randomly have kids all over the country now. But because of that, I always gives very importance to other people, how they live, how they work, how they do their things. Because I realized that as much as I read all the rules in the law, a lot of them doesn't make sense. Good rules equals good design of the rules, and the best design of the rules comes from the people that will be ruled over itself. So out of that 5-6 years, I've been collecting all of this information, like, how people were feeling growing illegally, commercially, or growing for themselves commercially, or for their loved one without actually selling it, or growing to give medicine away, and how they do it from way back, and how everyone that's involved around it. And with that is where we use as the initial base for the rules. And also we use what went through Parliament last time because I was in the room when it was being drafted, where a lot of the wordings has already been put in place and, make it all official and stuff. So we use that as a base, plus the base of how people would normally react and how they are happy with certain rules, push that in together, and then go back out to the people and explain to them what we've done and whether they're happy with it and what else needs to be changed. So we actually changed it about 3 or 4 different times before we put it into Parliament Thursday. And now I have to collect 10,000 signatures to have that go in so that we can play a role in the drafting of the cannabis law, even though they may not even use our draft. But at least our draft would be part of the 3 or 4 different drafts coming in from different people or politicians or political parties that will go in, and they're supposed to make it into like some sort of a salad, a Cannabis Act salad. But we call ours Cannabis and Hemp Control Act. We choose to put in the word control. I actually suggested the word control in there, even though we didn't actually. It's not really for my view, is not to control the people that uses cannabis, but it's to control the government so that they aren't able to do things with cannabis. You know what I mean?
It's really admirable, and to hear that you would put all that time and effort and energy into drafting an act or a bill that may not be used, I think proves to people how important this advocacy is. This specific thing may not get you over the line, but all this work, all this sharing, all this talking, all this communication will ultimately help the cause. So there's a lot of people who sit on their couches and talk about how things should be, but you're out there doing that work, and I really admire that.
This is the second time around.
Yeah.
If there's going to be a third, well, go on. I'm ready. I'm better at drafting now.
Just try me. Well, I want to take a quick little pause from our conversation to play a little game called Hotbox. It is a rapid fire 60-second quiz with a countdown where I'll ask you would you rather style questions. Are you ready for it, Kitty?
Yeah, hit me.
Best thing about the cannabis industry?
People.
Worst thing about the cannabis industry?
People.
Indica, sativa, or hybrid?
Sativas for the day, the hybrids for the afternoons, and then the indicas before bed.
Flower or gummies?
Flowers always. I'm a flower girl.
Bongs or pipes?
Joints.
Brisbane Broncos or Brisbane Lions?
Broncos. I used to love Wyndham Sailor.
Favorite place to consume cannabis?
At home.
Favorite terpene?
Limonene. It goes straight into the brain.
Best munchies snack?
All the Thai desserts. All of them.
And describe your perfect 420.
My perfect 420. Oh God. With a joint in hand.
It doesn't take much, does it? We're easily pleased, us quote-unquote stoners. Well, thank you so much for that. I'd like to now talk about the fantastic shop located in Bangkok. Your store is incredibly inviting, and I purchased some outstanding locally grown GG4 there. What has been your experience owning and operating a store? You've obviously alluded to the challenges with the laws and lack of laws, but what has been the experience? What are the challenges? What are the successes?
I would say the biggest challenge is not everyone follow the rules. So we have people coming in on a daily. About 50% of our customer walk back out. So they're not our customer because we don't have the joints. We don't have all of those convenience product available at our store. But at the same time, what I tell my staff and what I also tell the customer is if you walk down the road, go to the left or to the right, you'll be able to find what you're looking for. And then they will ask me as to why are you still pointing me into the right direction? And I'm like, well, you're going to buy it anyway. And just because others don't follow the rules doesn't mean that I don't. And I actually do care about it. But the success in itself is that I support over 50. The numbers keeps on going up. Farms all throughout the country. have no idea how I managed to do that. We have so many flowers at our store. It's not funny. From bedroom growers who, this is their supplementary income to pay for school fees, because education in Thailand sucks because our government sucks. So we have to pay higher education. Or it's actually a lot of family businesses that supply to us. The mom and the dad grows, the mom trims, the kid benefit from the school fees. Yeah, a lot of those.
It's a real trickle-on effect, and I think that's something underestimated with the kind of big farmer or medium farmer approaches to a lot of places, where it's like you're forgetting that this could really support families. So, obviously you mentioned that families can be supported. Your store has a huge focus on local and regional growers. That's all you can buy in your store. So what are the differences some of these regions offer?
I would say you have to wait for the winter, because that's when the outdoor stuff comes, and that's when you'll see the differences of like the strains and the varieties and whatnot that exists in Thailand. Because during every other time, it will be grown indoor. And with growing indoor, you can control the environment. You can't really grow sativas indoor because you're wasting electricity of like 12 weeks plus just for it to go into full flower, probably 15. So that doesn't make sense. But I would say it's not about the region. If it's as soon as you go into indoor growing, it's about the grower. It's about how they do things. I would say SOP, the standard operation procedures, are very important. Even though those guys the hippies, they didn't actually wrote down the SOP, but if you go and observe them, they are doing the same thing as the big guys in the factories are doing. And with those and how the nutrients are used, some will go the whole 9 yards of organics only. And we have mycelium, we have fungi, we have a tropical climate where those things runs so easily. So that's where we have our differences. I feel like the organics are coming out and it's great. And with those way of how they grow, they are accidentally creating certain really interesting things that can be very beneficial commercially, such as the increased amount of CBG in flowers. I don't see that overseas. I don't see anyone talking about that at all, but I've found that coming in from all around the region of those who take that extra mile doing their own soil, and that whole process of trying to keep it as organic as possible, not counting where the fruits and the products come from, okay? Because I can't do that. Thailand is just filled with chemicals. So we'll just say that it came from an organic matter. How that's grown, let's just not think about it. So, but we have a lot of pineapples because of pineapple factories are here, mangoes and durian, all of those wastes that can be made into compost, into soil, into things that cannabis plants really, really love, because they really love the high rich nutrients. So the whole no waste is also a big part of that as well. Yeah, it's about the people. It's never about the plants, the flower or anything. It's always about the people, and we need to bring it back to the people. Even though with the big factory and the big farm, at the end of the day, they are just trying to simplify what these guys came up with as an SOP to make it easier, and then make it like a factory farm weed, like, the factory hens with the egg. Well, that doesn't that great.
It kind of plays into the prevalence of craft beer here in Australia. You know, you can have your mainstream beers that are available everywhere and are a little bit cheaper, but there's some real merit and virtue to those smaller brews, smaller batch, experimental things, something you might try one day and then never have again. Those are the really rich experiences that you can get from cannabis. And that's what's so exciting about being able to get it from different places and not just having one big giant company that sells it all. That can have all these little tiny operations that will give you a rich experience.
But here's the thing, though, how Thailand agricultural system usually done are small farms. Like our rice farmers don't have any more than 10 rye, like a few acres. And like there's a lot of collectives together. So it's no different than how we can manage cannabis with that. So the big farm doesn't actually make sense in our place at all. If they are really going to do that commercially, they need to look at other things. And everyone now is just focusing on the flowers, even though I would say the thing that will be the best commercial product out of cannabis itself is probably hemp seeds. Food. It's a huge market. They are competing for a tiny little cannabis market rather than go, oh yeah, I'm just going to take a bit of the chunk of the food thing, and that would actually make sense. It's the protein of the future. It's the base of a lot of vegan food. I use it but we don't have access to hemp seeds here in Thailand. We don't have a hulling factory or the processing center. So I can't eat whole hemp seed here. I have to buy the actual seeds itself, and then I need to figure out how to eat that, which I've managed to make hemp milk without being able to hull it, without having it all bitter and gross either. We had to become creative, but it's still very expensive. And it doesn't make sense commercially because everyone's just focusing on the bloody flowers.
Now, as we approach the end of the show, there's a segment called Polls of Wisdom. And though we value this long form conversation, we try to leave the listener with one key takeaway, dinner party fact, or even a call to action. So Kitty, what is your one poll of wisdom for the listener to take away today?
Learn, talk to people, listen to them actually, don't talk to them. Ask some question and then listen. I don't talk as much when I'm in those conversations, and I love to, observe and listen, because you will learn so much by just actually listen. And in this space, we need to listen to other a lot more. And also don't ever give up. I can tell you right now that on a daily, I sometimes sometimes I wake up and go like, what the fuck am I doing?
Oh yeah.
People hate, or like they're going after me right now. And it's like, why am I doing this? But it's the people that kind of kept me going. So by listening to them, by asking them questions, you actually end up finding your people. And that's how you will be able to go on from here. So without your people, you won't be able to do the things that you wanted to do. And this can be for cannabis or anything else at all, to tell you the truth. I managed to find my people, and my people are the one who's supporting me in this time. And when I wake up and go, fuck, what the hell am I doing? My people will be the one who tell me, you're doing the right thing.
Hell yeah.
Thank you.
Kitty, I know some of our listeners might be interested in following you online or getting in touch. What is the best way to find you on the internet?
Kitty, Chopaka, Google, you'll find me somewhere, somehow. Here's the thing. I don't answer usually on Instagram because there's a lot of creeps on there.
I bet.
Really interesting creeps. And then also I don't answer on LinkedIn at all. I think I've even shut down my LinkedIn. So if you see me on LinkedIn, that's not me, or like an inactive account, because there's even more creeps on LinkedIn.
There's business creeps. They're professional creeps there.
Oh, God. Those are really scary because they come on the guise of a business meeting. I actually answers a lot of my messages if it's not the simple hello, because I have no clue. I've answered those back and they end up being creeps. So I don't do that anymore. but I try to answer as much as I can because there is no other way for them to get information. But as people can probably call me, what's the word for it? Like only caring for a particular race, but like I'm not trying to be nasty, but it's more like I post things on Instagram in Thai because that's my people. I focus on my people first because this is where I am and I can't kind of focus on absolutely everyone. And I would not support anyone who will take away from my people. So that's kind of where I am. And I'm very proud in that front. But it doesn't mean that I don't support a lot of the international advocates with everything that they could ever want if I could provide. All the information, all the connections, anything. I don't care. I don't hold back. Like it's a global thing. It's not just Thailand. People don't realize that, but I need to make sure that Thailand, my hub, is as strong as possible before I go out.
Well, thank you for responding to this creep on the internet. And also thank you for taking an hour of your time to talk with Australians about what you're doing, because people are fascinated about what's going on in Thailand. They don't entirely realize what's going on in Thailand. And, you know, the absence of rules and regulations can actually make, you know, an exciting touristy trip to Thailand a bit of a nightmare. So thank you for clarifying. It's been an absolute pleasure to share this time with you and to hear your knowledge and wisdom. Thai cannabis users are lucky to have someone as passionate and enthusiastic about cannabis as you are, and I can't thank you enough for your time today. So, Khop Kun Krab.
You're more than welcome. ไม่เป็นไรค่ะ
Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations is written and produced by me, Paul. Music written and produced by Big Mike. Follow us on Instagram @GiveAndToke or get in touch by emailing giveandtoke@gmail.com. All opinions expressed by program guests are solely their current opinions and do not necessarily reflect the position of Give and Toke. Content discussed in this show does not constitute medical advice. Cannabis is not legal everywhere, so please be aware of local laws.